Hello, uh, good evening. I am here to talk to you about Ronald Reagan, a great communicator. Ronald Reagan was the 40th president of the United States, and he is considered by many supporters as one of the greatest presidents of the United States, because he supposedly ended the Cold War and was a great statesman. Others believe that Reagan was probably one of the worst presidents. He had a very itchy finger, and we could have gone to World War III in no time. However, I am not going to be talking here about Ronald Reagan as a politician, but as a great communicator. And in that respect, I think that most people believe that Ronald Reagan was indeed one of the greatest communicators of the 20th century. He was the president, as you probably remember, those that are about my age. He was the president from 1981 to 1989. So he was the president during the last few years of the Cold War. He was a very popular president. In his second election in 1984, he carried all the states in the United States, with the exception of Minnesota. That happens to be precisely the state where I live. So Minnesota didn't vote the majority of the population of Minnesota did not vote for Reagan, because the opponent of Reagan in that election was Walter Mondale, that was from Minnesota. But in any event, Reagan won by a landslide. I mean, just tremendous. Very few other presidents have obtained the presidency in such a way, with so much votes. His style, Ronald Reagan had a style that he used to speak calmly, but very, very strong. He established a genuine relationship with his audience. He was persuasive and engaging in a very personal way, and he constantly had to create his own credibility because of this personal style that he had every time that he spoke to the press, or spoke to the journalist, or spoke to the people. He was a very charismatic individual and communicated a strong belief in his vision. He was a great storyteller, but there are very, very few speeches that he didn't tell stories. He had a tremendous natural wit, a great sense of humor. After his assassination attempt in 1981, for example, he was injured and taken to the hospital, and then supposedly he told the physicians, "Please tell me that you are Republicans." So even in that very serious moment, Reagan was joking and very, very humorous. Some of his quotes are very memorable. For example, one of them was, "Welfare's purpose should be to eliminate as far as possible the need for its own existence." Or another one is, "I have wondered at time what the Ten Commandments would have looked like if Moses had to run them through the U.S. Congress." So he had a very, very blunt way of speak. Obviously, he was a previous actor, so he was a dramatist. So maybe that's why he was such a good communicator. As you know, he was for many years before he was an actor in California, and he performed in many, many movies. His use of humor was many times even about himself. There was a time, for example, that he said, "But there are advantages to being elected president. The day after I was elected, my high school grades were classified as top secret." So he joked even about his grades in high school, that probably were not very good. Supposedly he appeared in more than 50 films, even though in most of those films he had a secondary role and not a, I mean, he was not, in very few movies he was the star of the film. He worked a lot in many movies, but in most of the movies he played the second role, and he also was a radio sports commentator where the audience was interested in a consistent way of reporting and an accurate way of reporting. And usually Reagan's speeches were that way. I would say that he was a very controversial president, but both Republicans and Democrats, I think, are in agreement that the President Reagan was a great communicator. He basically captivated his audiences, and he was hated and loved by many segments of the population. But I think that everybody agrees that he was a great communicator when he was in front of the public. Thanks very much. Bye bye.